Recording. Hello, everybody. Thank you guys so much for being here. Welcome to 2021. We've managed to make it. So congratulations. That in itself is a victory. Now we're going to talk about inventory management. We're going to talk about the best practices for inventory management. And I'm going to show you everything inside of the Restock tool. If you're using another tool, if you're using Excel spreadsheet, you possibly could get some of these things done and might learn some new techniques and new ways to build out additional spreadsheets. We tend to like to get away from spreadsheets, but if you are currently on spreadsheets and you're not yet graduated to a tool such as Restock, you can probably use some of these tips to implement into that as well. And as far as other tools, it might help you to understand how you should be looking at these tools and making sure that they are currently working well for you in terms of the resources that they have, the features that they have, and should be able to walk away with a plan for implementing a better inventory management system for 2021. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to be going back and forth. We're going to go from the inventory planning slides, and also going to be jumping into the Restock tool. So let me know if you can see my screen now. You should see the slides, the inventory planning to win 2021. So that is what we're talking about. So a little bit about myself, just very briefly. If you don't know who I am, my name is Chelsea Cohen. I have been selling on Amazon since 2014. And around 2018, I really started realizing that, it was gradually realizing that inventory problems were really harming my business. I call it death by paper cuts. It was a mistake here, a mistake there, and it was eating away at my profit. It was eating away at the capital I had available to grow my business, and really taking a lot of time as well, right? So that's when I got into inventory management, right? And for example, some of these things that I was dealing with, stocking out, I've lost months at a time, lost full months of income for top sellers. I had a shipment that went to Amazon just after the cutoff date for Christmas, early on in my business, in I think it was 2015, and lost $30,000 worth of sales. And to me, that was huge for my business at the time. Basically, all of Christmas, my top seller was out of stock because Amazon lost my shipment because I had sent it just a little bit too late. I've over-ordered products and ended up paying thousands of extra dollars in storage fees and loan interest for the product because it was a miscalculation. Overestimated holiday inventory based on bad data. Ended up again paying thousands of storage fees and loan interest. Type something into the chat if this sounds at all familiar to you. I know that even last year was probably one of the most hectic years for inventory management. It is getting better, but I don't think it's going to be fully returned to what it was before COVID. So we are all having to adapt, and that's what I want to talk about, is how do you adapt to what's happening right now? What are the things that you should have in place, and how can you quickly and easily do that? All right, yes, and stocking out also does hurt the IPI. We are going to talk about the Inventory Performance Index as well, right? So I knew I needed a solution, obviously, right? And essentially, I had an idea of what I wanted. I had an idea of a tool. I was looking for a tool. I found some things out there and I tried them, but they didn't seem to work for me. So they were either extremely expensive and very, very confusing, or they created confusion. I didn't know how the numbers were being calculated. I didn't understand exactly how to use the platforms. So I went to various different masterminds I was in, and I started asking questions about, what are you using? And the answer invariably came back to, we've tried everything. There's nothing good out there. Let me know if you find something. So that gave me an idea, of course. And about 2 weeks later, I met this guy. So this is Dan Fernandez. He is the founder of Thomason.com. It's an influencer marketing platform that connects brands and influencers. And I had used his tool in 2015, right before the reviews changed. They were doing a lot of video reviews with influencers and putting them on Amazon before that was against terms of service. So I had heard of his software, and I knew that they had had some trouble and could no longer work with Amazon sellers, but they had pivoted their business, or at least continued to move their business in a direction where they were still around, they were successful, they were doing well. And he was another speaker. We spoke at the same event, and we ended up hanging out all weekend. And I had just decided I was going to build this software tool. He kept complaining that he was bored and he needed a new software project. And so we connected up, got together, and put together Restock. So 2.5 years later, here we are. And so essentially, for over 2 years, we've basically been eating, sleeping, and breathing Amazon inventory management. We've talked to hundreds of 7 and 8 figure sellers by now, and gotten to know what their systems look like, what pain points they have, where they need help with improving systems, what are the mistakes, why are people stocking out, what are those things that cause a stock out, what are those things that cause people to overorder, and starting to bake into our system best practices. And that's what we're going to talk about here. Is we've looked at inventory management software, we've talked to people who've used other inventory management software, what was good about it, what wasn't good about it, and we are continuing to streamline and put more and more features into the software to make life easier on Amazon sellers. So, common inventory mistakes, right? Under ordering is a common mistake, right? Not ordering enough. And this occurs when your data is off. When you have incorrect data, then, or you're looking at your data incorrectly, it can cause you to stock out. So for example, if last Christmas you sold 6,000 units, but you stocked out for a week and lost 1,200 units worth of sales, you should have had 7,200 units, obviously. So if you're looking at your data and you look at how many sales you did during Christmas last year, and you forget that you stocked out, you might again order 6,000 units and again stock out for a week. So it's one of those making the same mistake twice because you're using bad data. When you're using overall sales numbers, that is a fallible way to do your calculation. So I'm going to talk about what is the best practice for doing your velocity or your sales calculations. Another mistake is over ordering. This is the same thing. It's the other side of the coin for that same thing. You're just using wrong data, right? You're looking at the data incorrectly. So an example would be a sales spike that is not going to occur again. So for example, say last fall you sold 10,000 units of a product. And as part of that, there was some media outlet talked about your product on the news or something, or maybe an influencer mentioned, and you had this huge spike in sales due to that, then your actual sales should have been 7,000 units, but there was this anomaly that occurred and you sold 10,000 units. If you don't analyze that data and you don't remove that spike from your data and you're just using hard numbers, you could over order by 3,000 units. And of course you'll sell that out, but why pay extra storage fees? Why carry additional inventory? Why tie up additional capital when you could just accurately order? So this is why unevaluated sales data is potentially dangerous to your business. All right, and then the one of the last ones is just simply cutting it too close, right? It takes a lot of time to do your calculations. And so sometimes when you have other things going on, you tend to put it off because you know that it's a big project. You have to sit down, say every month or so, run all the reports, put all the numbers in, look at everything, analyze everything, and it just takes a long time. So you tend to put it off until you're too late, or you don't even have a system. You don't have an appointment, a weekly or a monthly appointment with yourself to actually look at your data. You just hope that you pay attention enough to realize when you're supposed to be placing another order. Okay, so that's cutting it too close. So we're going to talk about inventory best practices. So we have some of these problems, and there are various different reasons for these issues, these mistakes. But let's talk about what are the best practices to have in place. And you don't have to put these in place all at once. It can be overwhelming. It can feel like drinking from a fire hose. And this is why we're recording the call, so that you can gradually go through each one and start getting these individual best practices in place instead of doing it all at once. Of course, you can do it all at once, and that's what we do over at SoStock. We try to put the best practices in place all at once, but sometimes you can just do it gradually on a gradual basis to get to the point where you're eventually where you want to be, right? And so that's what the goal is here in 2021 is, start taking, these practices and implementing them into your business gradually. So adjusted velocity. So this is the first thing that we like to talk about. Adjusted velocity, every time you're looking at your sales numbers and you're trying to figure out how much to order, you should be looking at sales velocity, right? Not total number of sales, because if you're looking at total number of sales, you miss the sales spikes, you miss the stock outs. So you want to take an average for a specific period of time. We like to call it a daily average. So if I'm looking at 30 days, I would take a 30-day daily average, and I would adjust it based on stock outs and sales spikes. The reason for that is that if you've stocked out for 10 out of that 30 days, you should really have an average based on the 20 days that you were in stock. All right, so we're going to talk about how adjusted velocity works. So we're using averages, not monthly total sales, right? You also have the ability to use last year's sales. You're going to factor out sales spikes, stock outs, deep discounts, and you can also potentially add a growth trend, right? So you're forecasting based on your true velocity. I want to show you in SoStock what would that look like. All right, so here is an adjusted velocity. So you can see there's a series of days. So for example, if you're doing a 30-day adjusted velocity, you could do a combination of 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, or, or something else, right? For this period of time for this product, you might want to switch to these smaller, shorter term number of days, since this product seems to be ramping up and is a good sales period for this product. Products like that would be health products and any products that people use when they're making New Year's resolutions, right? There are spikes for specific categories of products. So you pick your daily average, and you could also, for say you're planning for Christmas, you could use last year's sales data instead of a daily average. And what that would do would be, so instead of looking back at your entire sales for the entire period, it's going to be replacing every day worth of sales with the sales that you made on each of those days. So on the 15th, it was 44 sales, then it was 43. And so it's plugging in all of those sales, and it's basically taking what you did last year and replacing them. The only other thing that's happening is that if you did stock out, it's going to take an average, and it's going to replace those days that you stocked out with an average of what you would have sold if you had not been stocked out. So that's very important, is that anytime we're looking at these sales, we're always taking an average minus any of these stock outs. And so the stock outs, depending on what system you're using, it's very important to know how individual systems calculate stock outs. So if a system calculated just 0 sales, or they calculated just whether you had inventory or not, that would not be enough to really get an accurate count on the stock out. So what we do is we calculate, did you have inventory? And if you didn't have inventory, of course, we're going to count that as a stock out. But you also see days here such as, 10 days or 10 units were sold, 6 units were sold. And so it's looking at your average as well. And if you sell too little, then it's going to flag it as a potential stock out, right? So if you're used to selling 100 units and you sell 10 units, that's a potential stock out, in that you might have went out of stock, had a few days of stock out, then come back in stock. Those 2 days between the stock outs might have been significantly lower, and they would throw off the average if we weren't calculating them as part of the stock out. or when you're stocked out and Amazon finds 1 unit and sells it. That could throw off your average as well. So those are things that we're removing, and you have the ability to decide whether you want to remove them or not. So for December 25th, this might have been an accurate sales day, right? There's 15 units for Christmas because there are not a lot of people on Christmas that are making these sales or making purchases. So you might want to add those back in, but that's how you should be looking at your stock outs. Sales spikes is a similar, the only thing is it's looking at anything that's 150% of your average sales for the period or higher. It's going to consider that that could be a potential sales spike. Now, maybe you want all your sales spikes in there, right? But for example, Prime Day was on an odd time for the year. So we might want to remove Prime Day, but leave everything else. It's very much flexible, but we'd make those decisions. Prime Day in October, if we're using our October data, we'd want to remove that because that's not going to tend to happen again. All right. Okay, and then there's growth trends. You can add growth trends as well. Let me show you. Essentially, growth trends would be looking at how many sales you had this period versus last period. So you could do a year-to-date growth trend, for example. If you're looking at last year's sales and you're adding a year-to-date growth trend on top, that might be helpful to you. Okay, but that's getting into a little bit of specifics. The most important thing to know is that you are looking at your average velocity and you're removing sales spikes and stock outs. Deep discounts is also something you would want to remove, such as giveaways. Now, that's not necessarily always something that we are doing anymore. We used to do a lot more giveaways and deep discounts before the Amazon terms of service changed. All right. Okay, buffer stock. So buffer stock is another thing that you should be implementing as soon as possible. It's also known as safety stock, and it's considered like a false zero alert. So it's something that triggers you to order before you hit a stock out. It's, for example, you could put 250 units. You want to know when you hit 250 units, you want your next order to be arriving, not when you hit 0, right? So it's kind of like the empty light that comes on before you run out of gas. That's what you should consider buffer stock to be. There are a couple of guidelines for buffer stock, and some of these guidelines people don't really think about. So it's important to get into the details of this. So you have longer lead times and transfer times, then you're going to want a higher buffer stock, right? If your lead time is 1 week, so say you're in wholesale and you're getting your inventory from a distributor locally and it takes about 1 week, you could probably have a smaller buffer stock because there's not as much that could go wrong. When you lengthen out that buffer stock, say 60 days, 90 days, and you're moving it all the way across the planet, there's a lot more that could go wrong. You get stuck in customs, there could be a delay, there could be a storm, there could be a lot of other things that are going wrong that cause you to want to make a higher buffer stock to make up for the fact that there's a lot of things that could potentially go wrong. So that's one way to look at buffer stock. Another guideline for buffer stock is the best rule of thumb is to use buffer stock in units or in days if you can, rather than in units. And the reason for this is that if you're using an adjusted daily velocity, you can then calculate your high season and your low season, right? The buffer stock will be flexible and will change with the seasons. Your higher season should have a higher buffer stock. Your lower season can have a lower buffer stock. But if you're just using units, you're going to have to change that constantly to what you actually need. So we do allow for using buffer stock in units and in days, but days is preferred. Another thing to consider is that you may want to have buffer stock for FBA and another buffer stock for your warehouse, right? And then the last thing to consider is that Amazon's algorithm may favor products that keep a higher level of stock. So if you're getting down to 5, 10 days, even 15 days, you may not have enough stock spread across the country because Amazon's trying to hit their 2-day prime, and also some products are trying to hit 1-day prime. So we have sellers who have seen their 1-day prime badge get removed when they have too little stock. And there's some testing of geo ranking, which means that you might rank higher in one part of the country than another part of the country. If you don't have stock, a good amount of stock in that part of the country, it's likely that your competitors will be put higher than you, or that your sponsored ads will be the sponsored ads you're competing for will be favored for your competitor who has more inventory in that area. So that's just something to keep in mind. I see a lot of people putting, a minimum of 30 days, and that seems fairly comfortable for a lot of sellers in terms of a decent buffer stock number, right? So we have the buffer stock feature, right? The buffer stock feature is here, and so you have it in days and in units. So you can put a buffer stock for FBA, and you can also put a buffer stock for your warehouse. So that is a good rule of thumb if you are using a warehouse. All right, min-max restocking. Min-max restocking sets a range of highs and lows. This is something that makes it a lot easier to know what to order, how much to order, and by when. It also makes it a lot easier to streamline and to pass tasks on to your VAs because it's creating a system, right? So there's a lot of the time we tend not to give up certain things because we think that that we're the only one who knows how to do it, or we have to do it by gut feel. And we're never going to scale our business if we don't let go of that inventory piece and we don't set these guidelines. So let me show you what I mean by min-max restocking. All right. So min-max restocking is part of our order and transfer schedule. I do see there's a quick question about buffer stock. You can bulk change those buffer stocks easily at any time. Yes, that's correct. So in terms of buffer stocks within the system, if you were to come in here and you wanted 30 days of buffer stock, you can apply everything that you do inside of the forecast can be applied on a SKU level, or it can be applied across your entire catalog, right? All products, or you can create special tags. So if you have special tags for things that you want, for example, Christmas, I want to make this particular change for all the Christmas products, or I want to make this particular change for all my products that I have a hard time keeping in stock because of the restock limit. You can tag, say, create a restock tag, for example, and make an update to use restock limits, right? Your max ship quantity limits only for those products that you're having a hard time keeping in stock, right? Because sometimes using the IPI limit is way too much for your slow moving products. So we do have a lot of ability to do filtering and to do bulk applications and bulk changes based on filtering, based on certain categories, and based on certain tags. So that's a good question. All right, so order schedule. So we're going into when you use the feature, let's go to transfer schedule. When you use the feature as needed, right? This will activate what's called min-max restocking. Min-max restocking, for example, if we're setting a minimum and a maximum. Our minimum is our buffer stock. Our maximum is the highest amount that we want to have in stock. And setting this will allow us to minimize the amount of time we're constantly shipping things in, right? If we're always maxing out and then selling through to our buffer and then maxing out again and selling through to our buffer, then we're very consistent with the amount of times we're shipping. So you can set a minimum and you can set a maximum, and it becomes very easy to determine how much to send in. And it's looking at 90 days worth of stock. It's looking 90 days into the future. Even if you have sales that you've programmed in, even if you have anything that you have going on, it's looking 90 days into the future, and it's targeting out how much inventory you're going to need for that particular time period. All right. So for slow moving items, this is a question. So for slow moving items, we uncheck the IPI limit option. Yes, at this point, now in the future, we will be adding the ability to, when you check the IPI limits, our goal is to have it be where it does whatever is less, right? Your max stock or your IPI limit, whatever is less. We haven't made that update yet, so we will let you know when that happens. But at this point, for slow moving products, uncheck the IPI limit option for sure. And then a question, is there a feature for minimum order size from a supplier? Yes, there definitely is. All right, so the minimum order quantity is here, right? You can set that there. And then the minimum transfer quantity, if you want to transfer, want to set a minimum for transferring for how much to transfer. All right, so we're talking about min-max restocking. So you can set min-max restocking. You can also set your minimums for your warehouse. If you're doing your order schedule as needed, it will activate min-max restocking for both your warehouse and your FBA. All right, new share. Okay, so the benefits of min-max restocking. You can optimize your inventory levels, you can reduce stockouts, you can reduce high FBA storage fees, and you systemize your reordering and transferring so that you can easily delegate the task to a VA. Okay, inventory timeline. So this is a game changer. This is helping you to visualize your sales and the inventory patterns over time, right? It's vital for planning and for inventory strategies. So if you're not using SoStocked and you're using spreadsheets, I highly recommend you put together an inventory timeline. You would need one for every single one of your SKUs, but they're extremely valuable. And I'll show you the benefits and what that looks like. So this is our inventory timeline. It will show you how much warehouse inventory you have, and it will show you, when to transfer, right? Any transfers that are going to be occurring. The transfers that are lighter, this is a forecasted transfer, right? What we're suggesting, and this is an actual transfer, right? This is an actual PO that's going to be arriving. Here's your inventory, right? It shows your any sales spikes or any lightning deals or anything that you have programmed in there. And we'll get into, I don't think we'll really get too much into the marketing tools, but I will talk about that very briefly. It'll show you any stockouts that are going to be occurring, right? And when you're going to come back in stock. So it just shows you everything. Here's the sales that you have planned. If you have a sales spike that you wanted to add in there. For example, we added Prime Day. We added some additional sales for Prime Day. And so it's looking at all of these numbers. It's not looking at very simple, what's the velocity multiplied by the days. It's looking at also all the data you have plugged in there. So you can actually visualize your inventory, which can sometimes be very difficult, especially when you have longer lead times. Oops. I think I'm going the wrong way. Okay, so timeline benefits. So track your inventory changes over time, visualize patterns, foresee stockouts, know when you need to place your orders or transfers. It gives you a running daily inventory count, and it shows you when your inventory is going to arrive. All right, so simultaneous forecasting. So if you have a warehouse, an exterior third-party warehouse, and then you have FBA, what you need to have is simultaneous forecasting. So you need to have an order forecast and you need to have a transfer forecast. So those are two things happening at once. And that is what we have going on inside of SoStocked, right? So that's what you have to think with, is that you're actually doing multiple forecasts at the same time. You can see in this timeline. So we have a forecast for transfers right here, and we have a forecast for orders here. And we can see there's two different dates. So you should always be set up with simultaneous forecasting. And if you have the need for express shipping, for air freighting something, that would be a third forecast that you would have calculated into your inventory management. All right. Forecast modeling. So what we're doing is forecast modeling. We're not just doing forecasting, right, based on past sales. we're taking past sales history and we're also taking future marketing plans and we're putting those together into a model of what would happen if, right? My plan is to do this. My plan is to increase my sponsored ads by 10%. My plan is to do a lightning deal, do an email campaign, and you're adding those together. And this will allow you to see what your projected sales are and to see if you're actually going to have a stock out based on that, right? I've had clients who have stocked out because their PPC agency went crazy and didn't really vet their inventory. I've had them cancel lightning deals because they couldn't afford it based on the amount of inventory they had. I've had them sell 20% off coupons on Mother's Day and stock out the next month on Father's Day. These are all things that sound like good ideas. All these marketing campaigns sound like good ideas and they get the sales going, but if they cause you to stock out, they actually turn into really bad ideas. So you have to plan out. So forecast modeling is what we call planning those out, syncing up your marketing with your inventory, right? So there's marketing, inventory, and cash flow. And that needs to be a cycle and it needs to all work together. We call it sync to scale. So Amazon marketers tend to focus too heavily on marketing. I wouldn't say too heavily. I would say they focus narrow-mindedly sometimes on marketing. So you need to kind of broaden your view and see where you can actually, incorporate your inventory planning and your cash flow planning into this. So that's what SoStocked is designed to do. Right now we're on the piece in terms of the growth of SoStocked, we're on the inventory piece. And then once we finalize, the final features on our inventory piece, we will then be pushing into the cash flow piece so that we can take your marketing plans, which Amazon sellers are really good at, and then extend it out into inventory and cash flow to really flesh out a very full and well-developed and well-rounded business. So I like to say a good marketing plan can turn bad fast when it's so successful it causes stock outs. Okay, so we talked about this, PPC ad campaigns stocking you out, discount coupon emails stocking you out, listing optimization doubles your conversion. That's another one. So when you're doing a listing optimization change and you think that's going to double your conversion or think that's going to improve things, what you should do is you should actually start looking at your new sales velocity. So I would say maybe you were looking at your 30 and 60 and 90 days. When you do your new campaign, you might start focusing on your 7-day marketing or velocities while you're doing that. So that's one of those things where you're changing something significantly. Really start to look at how is it affecting things, and maybe if you're doing some significant marketing with particular SKUs, you for the time being switch to some of these narrower, shorter term velocities. And you again could utilize tags to do that, right? You could tag it as marketing, and anything with marketing, you could then switch the velocity settings for those particular SKUs. All right. Let's see where we are on time. Okay, good. Okay, inventory. So inventory has to be factored into your marketing plans like we talked about. And it's, again, the huge missing piece. It's a big missing piece to scaling, right? You'll never be able to scale if you constantly are stocking out, right? Because you're losing a lot of money and then you're having to spend money to re-rank. And it's just very counterintuitive to expanding and scaling your business, right? So, we're all in inventory-based businesses. So, when you really think about it, if you're out of inventory, you're essentially out of business for that period of time. When you're looking at inventory, you have to actually have the right numbers. And sometimes there are some softwares that are not using the accurate numbers, right? For example, the reserve will just disappear. And so you've got maybe all this stuff that's in reserve in the middle of being processed, and you can no longer see it. Some of the programs were doing that, where you could no longer see the reserve amount. And so you thought you needed to send more inventory in, but you actually didn't because, say, a good chunk of your inventory was in reserve being processed. So an accurate inventory count has to include your available inventory, your reserves minus customer orders, anything you have inbound to Amazon, any warehouse inventory, anything inbound to the warehouse, and anything in production or on order, right? So that's what the tool is doing. It's looking at all of those things, right? It's looking at available inventory. It's looking at reserved and removing customer orders from those reserved. It's looking at anything you've got inbound to Amazon. It's looking at anything you have in your warehouse, and then anything you have on order, right? Like this PO. And it's doing all this calculation based on everything that you have available, right? If you leave any one of these pieces out, then your inventory forecast is not going to be accurate. You could be ordering things that you don't need to order because you're missing one of these pieces. So you want to make sure with whatever system you have that you are tracking all of those things, right? We have an order tracker that helps you to track your orders in production and route. And then of course you have the ability to look at your inventory on hand based on your Amazon available, reserved, inbound to FBA, warehouse stock, inbound to warehouse. And anything that is inbound is also considered inventory that is on order or in production. All right, we have another question. So for a purchase order placed before we got so stocked, does it mean we have to create a new purchase order, or can we add the order details manually without sending the purchase order? Yes, you don't have to send the purchase order. You don't ever have to send the purchase order to the supplier. It's not automatic. You can make a choice to just activate the purchase order without sending it. So for example, if you had a purchase order, you could just create a new purchase order and backdate it, right? So you're going to backdate that purchase order to whenever you ordered it, and make sure that your lead time is correct so that the date of arrival is on the day you expect it to arrive. So that's the real key, is making sure that those arrival dates are correct. So if this one was going to arrive, say on the 15th, I would then adjust my date to make sure that it's arriving on the 15th. And then it'll put it inside of your timeline, that inventory timeline. It's going to put it there in the right place. All right. Okay. Cash flow. So cash flow, like I said, we're going to be getting into cash flow. I'm not going to talk too much about cash flow, but later on we will be getting into cash flow in terms of our software, right? We're going to get into cash flow and logistics. So that's kind of the future of So Stocked. But cash flow directly affects your marketing and your inventory. So controlling your cash flow becomes important, right? Extremely important. We actually have a little checklist of and a little workflow of how your business should run in terms of the marketing team sending their plan to the inventory team checking it out, approving it or not, then sending it to the cash flow team, and then it finally makes its way back to the marketing team to execute, right? And that's the general flow of how things should go. That is not really currently happening right now, but I can tell you I've talked to enough inventory team members to let you know that it would be extremely valuable, because the inventory team is constantly picking up after the marketing team, who does a great job but doesn't tend to include inventory into the equation, right? And so one of the things that we like to note is your ability to scale is directly proportionate to the intelligent utilization of capital, right? So it all works together. Your marketing has to support your inventory, has to support your cash flow. If you're truly going to scale your business, you're going to get all those pieces working together. Any one team falling down is going to bring the other teams with them. It's just going to happen, right? Okay. So symbiotic, not parasitic, right? So this is, like I said, if the marketing team makes a decision that creates a stock out, then the inventory team and the cash flow team is going to suffer, right? If the accounting team does not control the cash properly, right, and makes some purchase that really, they thought was a good idea at the time, like buying new computers for everyone, but actually that money should have been spent on inventory, and then they can't afford inventory, that's going to be a problem for inventory and the marketing team. as well. So every single, and then if the inventory team doesn't get their orders in on time, the marketing team then doesn't have anything to sell, and that hurts the cash flow as well. So you see how they all need to be symbiotic or working together, not parasitic, one, one feeding off of the other and the other's suffering, right? Because then they all basically suffer at that point. So again, marketing, inventory, cash flow, syncing all of these to scale your business. All right, let's talk quickly about the seller stock out cycle. So this was something that everyone got to know really well during this last holiday season. So Amazon takes weeks to check in your inbound shipments. Then your product stocks out while waiting for Amazon to check it in. And then you have they're looking at 30 days of sales. They're not using an adjusted velocity like we are. They're looking at total number of sales. So the way that they're calculating the restock limits is actually with a fallible calculation. Their logic is not right. So they're looking at 30 days of sales. Your sales go down in those 30 days. So your restock limit goes down and it reduces the amount of inventory you can send in. You send in the lower amount that you can send. Amazon takes weeks to check it in, and it's a vicious cycle. It's actually a dwindling cycle of lower and lower restock limits and more stock outs. So we can talk about the solution to that, right? So what would be the solution? Well, staying in stock is vitally important, of course, right? Even if Amazon makes it more difficult for us to do that. So let's talk about what do we actually do? How do you actually stay in stock more? And if you can't stay in stock, what can you do to mitigate the damage to your IPI score and the damage to your restock limits? So you have to have a backup plan, right? So don't let Amazon be your only distribution channel. They want to be your sales channel, but they shouldn't be your only distribution channel, right? Meaning they shouldn't be the only way that you can get your orders to your customers. So that's where it comes in to set up a warehousing and transfer system and to create a backup distribution channel. So the solution really to maintaining your restock limits is FBM sales. Not everyone can afford this, but if you can afford this, even at a narrower margin, it would probably be better for you than actually getting into that dwindling stock out cycle. So, even if your margins are more narrow, it's better to keep in stock than to get yourself backed into a corner, which is what Amazon has been trying to do. FBM sales will keep your restock limit up because Amazon's looking at total sales. They're not just looking at FBA sales, they're looking at total sales. So you will be able to, in essence, keep that limit alive, right? Keep that limit fairly well maintained in order to continue to send in a good amount of inventory. So if you have questions about warehousing, we have I have a warehousing reference, like a list of warehouses that you could use. And we also have a warehousing webinar on our YouTube channel. If you search "So Stocked" as one word on YouTube, you'll find our warehouse or our YouTube channel. Search warehouse and you will find our warehousing webinar, which gives you tips on how to pick a good warehouse, how to avoid fees, how to understand fees, what you could be screwed on. There's a lot of ways you can be screwed by fees. There's a lot of warehouses out there that have really horrible fee structures that you don't realize until you actually start dissecting what they're charging you. So that's something to know. And that's something that we will address down the road is building in tools to analyze your fees from your warehouses and how to find warehouses that have a good fee structure. All right. We did have another question. I wanted to see if I can search this. So you can manually override lead time dates. Yes, you can manually override lead time dates. So you can go into a purchase order and change the lead time for that purchase order only. The lead time is a guideline. And then once you actually have a purchase order created, you can change that lead time in that purchase order and it won't affect the general guideline that you're using. I definitely would like the warehouse reference list. Yes, so I will be sending out some access to that on the the email that I send out. So, you know, staying on this webinar ensures that that will go out to you. Okay, sync inventory to scale. So with your systems in place, the coordination of marketing, inventory, and accounting teams, and a solid plan, you'll be able to reduce stockouts, increase your margins, and scale more rapidly. All right, so any inventory solution should have these things in mind, right? Whether it's, you know, SoStocked, another software, whether it's your own system, you should focus on, you know, a system to remove sales spikes and a system to remove stockouts. These are the more complicated ones, since this is very granular data, and Amazon doesn't offer us that data as easily or as readily. So having those systems in place, SoStocked does that for you. Otherwise, you would have to figure out a way to track those individual anomalies, right? And make sure that you are accounting for those when you're using your data. So having those systems in place, and then the ability to factor in things like lightning deals, project seasonality. We didn't talk too much about that, but you saw the idea of how you can actually add additional sales on top of what your forecast currently is, or how it's currently being processed. Then you should have the ability to track your orders and transfers. You should have reorder alerts, and then a way to manage FBA, third-party or warehouse inventory, and then on-order inventory. All right, I'm going to open it up to some questions real quick. I believe there is a question here. Oh, okay, just a thank you. You are very welcome. Okay, good. I'm going to open it up to questions, and then wanted to go ahead and let you know about SoStock.com. So we have our continually developing tools. We are priced at $79 a month for life, and it doesn't matter whether you are have a ton of orders. If you're, you know, it doesn't matter how big you grow your business, how big you scale your business. Currently, we are offering it at a rate that does not have a tiered structure, right? And that's because we are in, I wouldn't say we're calling it our advanced beta. It's our advanced beta. We are still developing out specific tools, but it's a very full-fledged software that we have built it's been live for a year and a half. We will be developing it further, things like cash flow and that type of thing. But it's $79 a month for life. Later this year, we will be raising it. It'll be probably around $97 a month at the lowest base, and then it's going to climb up from there. It'll be a tiered structure up from there as well. So this is one of the, probably the next few months, you can get it at $79 a month for life. Okay, and as part of that, for a limited time, until we get too big and our system is too big for it, I actually do the one-on-one call. So if you have questions, once you set your system up, there's a flow for you to set your system up. And then after that, once it's set up, you give me a call. I look at your business, I talk to you about it, make sure that everything is set up right, answer any questions that you might have. And that is also a free thing that we do, a free service that we provide right now. All right. And so that concludes our webinar. I see there's another question here, but essentially you can reach out. If you have more questions, you can reach out at stock@sostock.com. And then intermittently check back. We have our webinar series at sostock.com/inventory-secrets. And intermittently we'll be introducing new webinars. And if you have an idea for a webinar that you would like to hear about, you can send us an email too. All right. We have fantastic. After watching 2 of your webinars today, I'm sold. I just emailed Dan back at helpme@sostocked to get us signed up ASAP. Fantastic. Can we get on your next onboarding slot? So yes, so you will get an email. Once you get into your software, there will be a phone link. You'll go through the system and there will be a little red phone. When you click that, you can get onto the schedule. So you'll want to get in there as soon as possible. It'll take a little while for you to, do the setup process, but book your onboarding call right away, because I do tend to fill up. I do believe that there were some appointments that were freed up. I had a couple of things in my calendar that, shouldn't have been there. So I deleted them and it freed up some time in my calendar. So jump in there, grab your slot, and then you can always go on to the demo calls with me as well if you have additional questions. And then our customer support is great. Dan is my business partner. He's the one handling the customer support. He is great. He gets back to people fast. He does videos. Every time I talk to someone about customer support, they're always saying your customer support is amazing. So he definitely, definitely has that extra bit of care to make sure that you know what you're doing. All right, we're gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna leave a few more minutes if anyone has any final questions. I do have, let's see, a comment here. Agreed, your support is superb, fantastic. Yes, we are very, very interested in not only making sure that you understand the software, but also taking notes to see what we can do better. And that's been the real successful action for us is, implementing these things. We have a smart team and we do a good job, but we are made much smarter by working with smart sellers who give us brilliant ideas. And we just tend to implement them, whereas others tend not to. So feedback is great. It's definitely been seller community powered, the development of this tool, and we are planning to continue with that trend for the duration. So thank you guys so much for coming, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you guys. If you do sign up for SoStocked, getting to know you, getting to hear about your business, and then helping you. And my favorite thing is, after some months pass, hearing how it has changed things. We had someone who said that they had done a bunch of expensive air shipments, and then using SoStocked, they went from $1.20 per unit on air shipments to about 45 to 55 cents per unit. So that was 75 cents of savings per unit just from using SoStocked and avoiding the emergency air shipments, right? We have someone who has a high 700s IPI score from having used the software for over a year. And so it's just, those are the things that we love to hear about is what is it helping you to do? How, is it freeing up a lot of time for you? Eventually we're working towards being able to find new ways and better ways to help you to save money, right? One of the ideas down the path is if you've got, a 6 units per carton, if you change to 10 units per carton, how much money could that save you? Because you're being charged per carton fees, right? So those are the types of things we're extremely geeky about and interested in. And we're going to be building out systems to be able to do the modeling and do those calculations of how much money does that save you on an annual or a monthly basis. That's the stuff that we geek out about. So I'm very interested and excited to continue on developing this tool. And again, $79 a month, that is for life. That's locked in with all of the features. We could down the road increase it to when other people sign up, they have to pay more for those additional features. We'll have the tiered structure. It may be that there are other features that have to be bought into, but getting into the software at this stage, that growth will be included in, and those features will be included into your services. All right, fantastic. Got some comments here. Superior support compared to others. One-on-one onboarding is huge for a decision. Fantastic. Great, thank you. Wonderful, thanks guys so much. I think we have some final Q&A questions. Thank you, we just signed up as well. Congratulations, I am looking forward to meeting you guys. I love to hear that. I'd like my VA to review the replay. When might it be available? So the replay, I try to get it out the day of, but if not, then I send it out the next day. So it will become available by latest the next day. So you'll be able to have them watch it and get things in place as well. All right, fantastic. Thanks so much, guys. Hope you have a beautiful day, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, let me stop sharing. All righty. And happy 2021. Thank you guys so much. Bye.